The HomeTech podcast is supported by you. To find out more, go to HomeTech.fm/support.
This is the HomeTech podcast for Friday, April 26th from Denver, Colorado. I am Jason Griffin, and I am not joined this week by my typical partner in crime, Seth Johnson. Seth had some stuff come up, and so he will not be able to join us, but I think we've got a great show nonetheless. We had Anthony Raynor on, who has been a longtime supporter of the show and a great friend of ours here at the HomeTech podcast, and we were really happy to get him on to help us out with another installment of our project series, which is something that I don't think we've done enough of. I always have a lot of fun recording these episodes, and it's a nice sort of opportunity to take a step away from what we typically talk about and looking at different companies and products and a lot of the big players out there and what they're doing, and really look at it from a different vantage point. Like, how is this technology actually translating to use cases in the home? And I think Anthony was a great example of that. He's got quite a bit going on. He's definitely been through his share of trials and tribulations as well. So be sure to stay tuned for that. That will be coming up here very shortly in the episode. But before we do that, why don't we go ahead and jump into some HomeTech headlines. CEDIA Expo returns to Denver, Colorado this year. We want to see you there. This 30th CEDIA Expo will feature engaging speakers, more new education than ever, and 4 days packed with opportunities for growth and connection. Register today. This, of course, from a CEDIA campaign that went out, and it's hard to believe, but it is that time of year again. We are just about 5 months away, I believe, from CEDIA being upon us. I am excited to have it here in my hometown of Denver. I know it's a great venue here, and look forward to having a bunch of folks come in here to my hometown, and I know it'll be another great event. Speaking of CEDIA, they did make a shift here with their keynote this year. They just released this information this week, and reading here from CE Pro, CEDIA is shaking it up in 2019 with an opening keynote address on, quote, disruptive thinking, end quote, presented by innovator, inventor, and disruptor Luke Williams. And Julie Jacobson over at CE Pro voiced a similar reaction I have to the word disruptor. I know it is a very cliched term, but all the same, no matter how you feel about that term, this gentleman definitely does appear very credentialed, and this will be interesting. It says, Julie goes on to say, it's the first time in a long time that the association has plucked the opening act from academia and business innovation rather than home technology and futurism. Williams is a professor of marketing and entrepreneurship at NYU's Stern School of Business and executive director of the university's W.R. Berkeley Innovation Lab. So again, certainly credentialed. I did take a few minutes to go on. I think CE Pro had a link we'll include in the show notes at HomeTech.fm/255. And there's a video of Luke Williams giving a presentation, and he certainly appears to be an engaging speaker and has some interesting ideas. So he's been part of a product development, pretty famous product development company called Frog Design, a product strategy and design firm. He serves as a fellow for global innovation, international bestseller with the book Disrupt, Think the Unthinkable to Spark Transformation in Your Business. He's invented 30-odd products and lectured in 21 countries. So again, pretty credentialed guy here. And I think, in my opinion, it's a nice shift. I've been generally a fan of what CEDIA has been doing with regards to their opening keynotes in recent years, but I think this will be a nice, fresh angle of attack for them. So I'll look forward to learning more about that. Shifting gears here, Sony is finally nearing the release of its 2019 TV line. The company has detailed pricing and availability for the sets, and the 8K-capable Master Series Z9G will start at $13,000 for an 85-inch model. Again, that's $13,000 for an 85-inch, so definitely not cheap. The series will arrive in June, and brace yourself for this one, $70,000 for the 98-inch Star Attraction. So again, that's the Master Series Z9G, $70,000 for that, and that won't come as a huge surprise to most of the professionals in the audience. We certainly know these TVs can get up there. Samsung's got their Q900 coming in at like $100,000. I know we've talked about that on the show. And so these are flagship TVs. They're not designed for your average consumer. This article from Engadget is kind of bemoaning the high price tag. But look, ultimately, these companies put these TVs out for a reason, and these are flagship sets. They're not designed for everybody to go out and buy, but they're designed to get people like me talking about them, which they have succeeded in doing, and I have no doubt that these will be very beautiful TVs. I've always been a big fan of Sony's displays, and I'm sure these will be no exception. Moving on here, Facebook is working on a voice assistant to rival the likes of Amazon's Alexa, Apple's Siri, and Google Assistant, according to CNBC, who is citing several people familiar with the matter. A team based out of Redmond, Washington, has been spearheading the effort to build the new AI assistant, according to two former Facebook employees who left the company in recent months. It is unclear how exactly Facebook envisions people using the assistant, but of course it could potentially be used in the company's portal video chat, smart speakers, as well as the Oculus headsets and other future projects. So it'll be really interesting to see what they come up with there, and probably even more interesting to see if people actually adopt it, given all of the challenges Facebook has had with privacy concerns. Amazon quietly launched a free ad-supported music streaming service last week for owners of the company's Echo speakers. The new service offers access to about 2 million songs through playlists and music stations. The Amazon Music Unlimited service the company offers for $8 a month offers about 50 million songs, to put the two in comparison. So clearly Amazon hoping to make the service, keep people sticky onto their platform. We talked about this, I think it was last week or the week before. I think it's getting a little bit confusing with Amazon. They've now got a few different services that you can use for streaming music, but options are always good. So definitely go check this out if you are an Echo user. Speaking of free streaming options, YouTube Music is now offering a free ad-supported music experience to anyone with a Google Home device. With this offer, you'll be able to play curated stations from YouTube Music. If you want extra features and more customizations, you will need to upgrade to YouTube Music Premium for $9.99 a month after a 30-day free trial. The YouTube Music Premium subscription is completely ad-free. I think the big thing to understand here as I read the story is that the free version that you'll be able to have access to does appear to only give you access to like curated stations. So for example, you can't call up a specific artist or a specific song. If you want the ability to do that, you will have to upgrade to the premium version. But all the same, a great free option for anyone out there using the Google Home. That will do it for our news this week. All of the links and topics that we've discussed on this episode can be found in our show notes at HomeTech.fm/255. Again, that's HomeTech.fm/255. While you're there, don't forget to sign up for our weekly newsletter, where we'll send you weekly show reminders and other occasional updates about all the great things going on here in the world of home tech. Also, don't forget, you can typically join us live in the chat room. We record on Wednesday evenings around 7 or 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Find out more at HomeTech.fm/live. Another great way to do that is head on over to Twitter at HomeTech Podcast, and I know we always send out a tweet before we get started. So definitely look out for that. Of course, not live this week because Seth is the mastermind behind all of that, and I wouldn't even know where to begin. So we've got a recorded show only this week, but again, 7 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern on Wednesdays. You can typically go join us in the chat room at HomeTech.fm/live. So with all of that by way of introduction to the episode, let's go ahead and jump into our conversation. Again, this is our latest installment of the Projects Project series, and we had a longtime friend and supporter of the show, Anthony Raynor, come on and join us. We hope you enjoy. Hey, Anthony, welcome to the show. How are you?
I am doing great.
Appreciate you taking the time to join us. I know we've interacted numerous times. You've been a longtime supporter of the show, and so we really appreciate you listening, and we've been looking forward to having you on to talk about what you've got going on in your home, and it's quite a bit. It's an extensive amount of home technology there, and we look forward to jumping in. But before we do that, why don't we take a quick moment? Maybe you can give a quick introduction to our listeners and just talk about kind of who you are and what your interest is in the smart home.
Well, actually, as we were just talking, I'm probably one of the few people who I actually don't work in technology. For about 20 years, I was a paramedic, and my wife and I were living in the Wilmington, North Carolina area. And she goes, yeah, I know you're a flight paramedic, and, helicopters crash, and we're getting married, and you're going back to school, by the way. Yeah. And so we know that is very high on the, spousal acceptance factor. So I did.
Absolutely.
Went back to Duke, PA, with a goal, and you'll find the irony in this, to give me more employment opportunities with a goal of moving to Colorado.
Okay.
Yeah, her father lived in Castle Pines. And so the job came available 1 hour from where she went to high school. And so now, 10 years later, we are here, and her father in Castle Pines, yeah, he lives in our neighborhood. So no one's in Colorado. But even though I work in healthcare technology, still kind of my hobby, very much so, since the days of DOS and, you name it. Home server was kind of my big kick there for a while, and that kind of died off. And in about 2014, with a little kerfuffle with ADT, I know that's never happened with anyone, kind of started getting into home automation and started picking up your podcast. Really not too many episodes from when you first started. And like I said, went back, picked up from number one, and been listening ever since.
Amazing. Well, we really appreciate that, and loyal, again, supporter of the show. It means a lot. It really does. Hard to believe we've been at it for 5 years, and that you've listened to the whole catalog is impressive. So thank you for that. And thank you for the intro as well. Let's jump in and start to talk about your house. But before we jump into the technology, can you give us sort of a general feel of the physical environment? So both the physical environment of the home itself, and also talk about other users. I know that's a big thing, right? For anyone developing a smart home plan, either do it yourself or through a professional. You've got other people in the house to think about. So walk us through just kind of the overall physical space and user landscape.
Our home, it's, I guess, around 2,800 square feet. It's pretty typical for the area, 2 stories. And once again, the spousal acceptance factor. I originally started, after my little tiff with ADT, I think my wife, when I was temporarily in Montana, I would like to have a security system. I said, well, that's great. So she contacted them. So for the minimal price of $45 a month to use the existing control panel in the rental home that we had, 2 motion sensors and 1 keypad, $45 a month. And we went to move a year later, they were going to charge me to move the equipment, some of which, like I say, was already in the home. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. So I searched around and ultimately settled on Lowe's Iris, because I'm kind of the one, this is kind of back in the Kickstarter days too, when you never know what would really come to fruition. And where we currently live, Lowe's is literally 2 miles down the road. So we've done a ton of renovations on the home. So I was like, hey, I got to get some lumber, $20 sensor. You'll never see it in the bill. So it kind of, met many needs. It's one app. The first kind of iteration was really heavy around the web portal, and it was comprehensive. And I really appreciated that. But, so in our home, my wife never really latched on to Iris, never really used it for security. If we left, I would do it, but she never, literally never did use it. And so, in the home, I did have, all the windows with contact sensors, motion sensors, cameras, controlled garage door, irrigation, thermostats, kind of the more, kind of average user. Did not have a lot of automations, because I even tried to take our in our home, in the main, I guess you call it the den, there's 2 rooms in the home with no overhead lighting, and that happens to be one. I'll control the lamps with automation. Yeah, that lasted about 1 day. So it was kind of my little toy to mess with. And now that, as we know, Iris is dead, I had to find a replacement. And so she had the name brand recognition was Simply Safe. And so in our home, so now we kind of had this great divide, the wife acceptance factor for security, her playground, if you will, was Simply Safe, and now my home automation, home control. So I guess we'll get into that later, how we've done it. But my needs are kind of more typical. Of course, throw in there a smattering of Google and Echo and all the other things that so many more people do have.
Yeah, definitely. So sounds like the kerfluffle with ADT there that you alluded to a couple of times was related to sort of moving out of one home and into the one that you're currently at. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, sir. I was not going to pay that much money for so few devices.
Yeah, I understand. And especially not with all of the options. And around the time that you were making that move, it was like the heyday of home automation hubs. And I speak about it like it's ancient history. It was only 5 years ago, but it really, a lot has changed. And as we've seen, Iris being a perfect example, things have come and gone, right? So I know you were recently on the Home On podcast, and we've got a lot of crossover, I think, in our audience. And so some listeners may recognize your voice. And I know you've talked about this sort of migration away from Iris. Let's hit that really quickly, because it sounds like when you first moved in, that was really what you based the whole system around. First of all, what's been your perspective on how that whole phase out or closure basically of Iris was handled by the company as somebody who was directly impacted by it?
I guess if you want the unabridged version, it's Home On number 117 with Richard Gunther.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the inside joke, in that it was not a rebate, it was a redemption. And in some ways, I guess Lowe's did redeem themselves. They handled it very well, because I was thinking about this on one of your recent podcasts. I guess I won't name it by name, but there was a certain very flashy remote. And you know which one I'm talking about. It cost about $300, and those people were very much left out in the cold. And so with, I guess Lowe's, really they gave you pretty much full price. And these were devices I'd been using for 3 or 4 years. They allowed you to, to keep the equipment, gave you a couple of free months of service at the end. So I realistically just could not complain whatsoever. And so I'd already been thinking about the transition anyway, because they were kind of that, proprietary platform, kind of in that silo. And it's like you always want that next level thing. So in some ways I was frustrated and was already thinking about moving away from them anyway. So I had a tentative plan to begin with, and then one day I opened my email, and well, there it was. So, they kind of forced the hand. But with them to close it, they had a new CEO come in just a few months back, and I'm sure he kind of, helped that along. But in general, I simply cannot complain.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, it's something Seth and I talk about fairly frequently on the show is sort of buyer beware mentality in the smart home. And that's not to excuse the companies that exit and leave customers high and dry. And it's not to say that it's not a big deal, but certainly when you get into the smart home, and especially when you're dealing with newer products and newer companies, it is sort of something you have to build into the equation. And as you've pointed out, there are tons of different shades of gray when it comes to how these companies handle the sunset of certain products. And it does seem to me, as a sort of outside observer who was not directly impacted by it, that Lowe's did a pretty decent job of handling that sunset. So that's good to hear. Well, let's dive in and talk a little bit more specifically about some of the technology that you've got going on in your home. Simply Safe, obviously been around for quite a while. It sounds like the security thing was a big factor for your wife. I mean, how have you found the acceptance factor of security and generally just using Simply Safe alongside of everything else that you have going on?
Well, I have to say Simply Safe, the acceptance factor is high, because I know that because she actually uses it. And, we both have the app on our phone, and I'll get an alert, someone's activated, someone has, unactivated, someone's at the front door. And I was fortunate enough to get a bundle on Amazon. I mean, really, I think it was a $500 bundle, and I bought it for like $190, and it included a free like $99 camera. So that was really a win. The only downside, the monitoring package we have is, $25 a month. So long term, I guess that could add up, but for my wife's peace of mind, the fact that she has it, it's a good product. One thing I noticed from the Iris days, the version 2 products, they would pair pretty well. The version 1 products, which I have majority of, that was a lesson in pain, honestly. Pairing may work very well, or you may just beat your head against the wall, especially their cameras. But with Simply Safe, not to say this newest generation is a better looking product. The app is a little rudimentary, but it's like instantaneous. It really works well. And so I can't complain about that at all. I'm always the deal hunter. So, looking for the eBay cameras, $170 and I get them for $70 and the bundle packages. But Simply Safe, it's really been a good fit for us. And the thing about it, she likes it. It works simply. So that is her half of the quote security. So the other half now is my playground. And in some of your prior podcasts, you kind of talked about home automation versus home control. And I never put as much thought into that, but now I have to think about it more. And I guess at some point we'll get into where I am now, because as I transition from Iris, well, the security part was easy. She goes, "Hey, what do you think about Simply Safe?" And I was like, "Well, you recognize the name? That's a win." So like many people, when you invest a fair amount of money in the Lowe's product, like say they refunded me, and I'll go and tell you, I was refunded $1,800. And so about the same time, just happened to be the wonderful county taxes for our cars came in, and you want to guess how much that was?
I'm going to guess it was about $1,800.
$1,800, exactly.
Synchronicity. There you go.
Yeah, it just infuriates us. But still, as I got the replacement parts in, for Simply Safe at first, and I said, well, there's still a number of items I would like to continue to use: the thermostats, the garage door openers, the Schlage locks. Those were the highest priced items. And, then I don't remember if it's Amazon sent to us or Lowe's said Amazon was giving a discount on the SmartThings Hub. I'm like, okay, that seems like a logical transition to that product. It's widely known. I use a lot of Android products. I have a Samsung phone. And so I received it, and, the thermostats, they paired with a bit of difficulty, but then I discovered that they didn't have a scheduler. I'm like, what? And then I could get one garage door open to pair, or garage door opener to pair, and the other one just wouldn't pair simply, or easily. And it wasn't reliable about giving me whether the garage door was open or closed. And that's kind of a big deal, obviously.
Right.
And then lastly, the door lock, I never could get that to pair. And then the last other, I guess, higher priced item was the irrigation controller. Nope, no luck on that one. And come to find out, no luck on anything with that one. So SmartThings, that hub, I bought it for just over $50, so it was not a big deal, but it's kind of just sitting there. And ultimately, it received, I guess, I frequent a lot, the Living with Iris forum. And obviously it talks about Lowe's Iris, and for years now, that's where you went for the Lowe's Iris information, help, and so forth. But now that, I guess the death watch for Iris is over, it's dead. That there's many subforums in there, and a lot of people have talked about their transition. A lot of those were looking at Habitat. And so Habitat had a sale, as they often do, and I think the other day it was even cheaper than before. And so the Habitat, and they have a wonderful community. The forum members are so helpful, and that Habitat, and it really just I think a couple of weeks or so, they put out some initial drivers for a lot of the Iris products. So what I thought was basically a number of products, well over 50, that could not be used again. Habitat, like in a couple of weeks came out, and now I've been able to use pretty much every one of my old items except for the irrigation controller and a door lock that supposedly can work, but I just cannot get it to pair. But there's, like I say, once again, the forum members, I just need to get the time, to go and try their suggested methods to try to pair.
Yeah. Yeah, so it sounds like your journey there with SmartThings in the middle was pretty short-lived, and you've got that sort of sitting off to the side now and have migrated over to Habitat. And Habitat's an interesting one to me. We had them on the show. I was looking while you were talking back at episode 208, so not terribly long ago. And I thought it was an interesting approach, particularly with their focus on kind of local processing. So for listeners who may not be familiar, can you give us a quick overview of what Habitat is and what sort of, I guess, aside maybe from the fact that a bunch of other folks who were migrating from Iris, that was obviously attractive to you, but is there anything other than that about the platform that sort of drew you toward Habitat?
Yeah, if you go back and look on the theaverageguy.tv website, Jim Collis and Mike Weger have a weekly podcast, and it was last week that I was on that podcast with Patrick Stewart, no relation to Captain Picard, obviously, is the big joke. And, he's I kind of honestly forget what his actual role is, but he provided a lot of information. And I guess their main focus is that they are a local hub, more secure, no outside control. And by being local, that their response, their actions occur much quicker. So when I purchased that hub, and I measured it earlier today, so when I first took it out of the box, it's 3 inches by 3 inches, and I believe about 3/4 of an inch thick. And I'm holding this hub in my hand, and I'm like, it's like somebody has sent you an empty shell. I'm like, how can this thing work being so small, so light? And I think you sent me, like, say, a fake product. There's no way this can work. So they administrate everything basically through a browser window. It's assigned a local address on your network, all local control, no outside control. I guess the biggest analogy I gave during that podcast was it's like, tweaking your router. You're on a web page and it looks very much like that, but at the same time, it's very powerful. They do have some dashboards, which is really interesting, that you can have many dashboards. I have one for basically a security dashboard, more of a home control dashboard for media and so forth. But the real big key of that is they accept many comers. They accept SmartThing, I guess, by Zigbee, Z-Wave, now Iris products, and they are just continue to expand from there. And on the show, Patrick even mentioned that they are now one of the biggest requested items was a phone app. Now, I still assume that you'll have to be on the local network because they do not allow outside control. Nothing, no server. It's private to you, only on your own network. And once again, they accept all comers, all products. So in my case, having products that were not, say, just HomeKit or just SmartThings and so forth, it was pretty much a win for me.
Mm-hmm. Now, I have been following this story a little bit, but I haven't been deep down in the trenches like you have, obviously. My understanding is that Lowe's Iris, they open sourced. I know that they open sourced a lot of the code for what was really behind Iris. Is that how Hubitat has been able to sort of attract people over, or is it more of an off-the-shelf integration with the devices that you're using to make it work? Like, do you know how they're doing that in the back end?
I don't, but I don't think it has a relation to Lowe's Iris. I guess they're I don't know if it's really open source. It's released on GitHub, what the proper term is, but it's called Arcus.
Yep.
And I believe they had their, quote, drivers. They're fairly generic Z-Wave and Zigbee drivers. So I believe they had that done before the code was released. And I'll suggest that as a future guest is there's a guy from the Living with Iris forums that I happened upon, and I follow him on Twitter also. So he is actually actively developing within Arcus, and he will post some photos, some posts on Iris as well as Hubitat, how he is progressing in his attempts to, proceed with the open source of Iris, which is called Arcus. But I believe the two are separate. Like I say, he's obviously a much more technical guy than I am, but he might be able to, come on the show and get much more down in the weeds with you when Seth can be here.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Get the two really smart guys in the room, right? Cool. So you've alluded actually a couple of times now to an irrigation controller that you've got, and I see in my notes here from our preparation, it was an Orbit irrigation controller, and I got to admit I'm not familiar with that one. So talk us through what sort of the lay of the land is with that specific piece of technology you've got.
For the most part, a lot of the Orbit, they're the the default brand at Lowe's or Home Depot. And most of them are dumb, irrigation controllers. We know how those go. You can make no sense of the schema on how to operate them. So when I had the phone app, within Iris, it was like great. You're outside and, there's a bad sprinkler head and you cut on the water and you find the bad sprinkler head from your phone. You turn it off so you don't have to keep running back and forth to the house. And that was just like I'm standing on my back deck and I'm like, I want to irrigate the backyard. And it's like, boom, and on my phone. And it's just the most wonderful thing. It's really the simple things that bring you pleasure, just like, changing the thermostat temperature from the couch when my wife comes by and turns it down and I'm freezing to death and I say nothing and turn it back up, that is allowed. But with Iris, like say, that brand just happens to be, and I think they have a generic Wi-Fi version. It's probably obviously just rebranded to Iris. And so that code is released. So hopefully someone on Habitat that is much smarter than I can resurrect that product within Habitat. And I'll still have the ability to use it. Because some of those items are like, well, I just need to limp them along. And that's what either Smart Things or Habitat, why I purchased them. And then yesterday, I'm once again the deal hunter. And so one of those two garage door controllers have been kind of problematic anyway. And yesterday, courtesy of Thrifter, here's the Chamberlain MyQ garage door openers, usually like $80 or $90 on sale for $50. Snapped up 2 of them. And I guess still the Raccio irrigation controller, if I see a decent enough sale, if I can't get some nice person to develop those drivers for my Orbit controller to use on Habitat or Smart Things, I don't really care. That'll probably be the one I'll go to there.
Yeah. It's really interesting hearing you talk about, having these different platforms in the home and Habitat and Smart Things. And I was having a conversation. I was at a birthday party for one of my daughter's friends recently and was talking to somebody there about my work in the smart home. And they were asking, how do you get started? And I said, well, the beautiful thing nowadays is like, the investment is much more minimal than it used to be, even 5 years ago, let alone 10. And also, like, you can start and sort of piece things together, and you don't have to go whole hog and really, throw down on a comprehensive system to start. You can kind of mishmash and put things together. In fact, I think you used the word mishmash in your email to me as we were preparing for the show. So it sounds like you've been able to successfully navigate that, and again, sort of look for those deals when they come up and piece things together as you go, which I think is a great way to approach it these days. And like I said, something that you really couldn't do, not nearly as efficiently even 5 short years ago.
One thing Richard brought up in the podcast was he was talking about really the Hubless home automation system. And now because in our home, of course, we had a number of Amazon Echo devices. I will not say the A word. I hope everyone's devices, went off.
Yeah, we do enough of that for you.
And don't ring the bell. We know how that went. But I do have, of course, a number of Google Home hubs. I do have a Google Home. I have a Google Home hub, have a Lenovo Smart Display, and so forth, being kind of the big Google guy. And so I did set up some of these items within the Google app or the Google Home Hub, if you will, and it can share, like my son, my wife, myself sharing that ability, to use those, call each other on Duo and so forth. And let me tell you, that is one hot mess right there. Because not only does it do that, and there's probably some settings down in the, the finer areas of the app, but it shares the calendars and it shares like everything that may do or do not want shared. But it was really to get the voice training correct. Oh, what a mess that was. But still, the app, like say the person, I'm not into tech, a working tech professional like you and Seth are, but still, probably a little more abilities than, maybe the average person would be. Because on Hubbard, the last, the podcast, the guy, Jim, the host, asked, would you put Habitat in your mother's home? And I'm like, absolutely not.
Yeah.
And my mother's early 70s. She just started texting a year ago, so probably not the best candidate for that.
Right.
Someone a little more, adept or lives closer to you, probably just fine, honestly. But I think the Hubless Home probably, like you said, you buy the thing and use the voice assistant, and you can build out from there much more easily.
Right. Yeah, I think there are, there's this dream of sort of the do-it-yourself smart home, but you kind of have to ask, well, who is the yourself in that sentence, right? Because certainly you don't have to be a professional and you don't have to be a programmer or even really savvy with technology, but you do have to have the tenacity and the will to kind of dig through, like you just talked about the mess with the calendar integrations and the sharing and how all of that just gets sort of, can kind of spiral out of control in a hurry. So you've got to be willing to roll up your sleeves and have some fun along the way. But definitely, it's a lot of these things don't pass that that good litmus test of, would you put this in your mom's house? I think that is a good question. I've heard Seth talk about that numerous times, and I think it works. So talk about voice control in the home. It sounds like you've got Echo and Google Home going on. Compare and contrast. I mean, where do you fall on the spectrum? Anyone listens to the show knows squarely where Seth falls on that conversation. But what's been your experience there?
Well, that's one of the jokes. My son, he's a little junior Apple fanboy, and we go to Costco, and he talks about HomePod and Apple. Like, yes, Siri in a can. That's working out real well for you, isn't it?
Yeah.
But when the even just a few years ago, and it's hard to believe it's not been any longer than it has been, received the announcement from Amazon, hey, we have this cylinder thing that'll talk back to you. Are you interested? And I'm like, 50% off? Heck, I'm willing to try it. And nowadays, we're like, it's hard to remember a time when you didn't have these. Of course, like most people, it's probably 90% what's the weather and play me some music. But I think a lot of people will find is that the Google product probably better at answering questions. And even though I have I can't remember what they call it nowadays, because they, what's the kill by Google page? It's like, let's rename a product, by Google page.
Yeah.
I think it's YouTube Premium now is what they call it. I subscribe to that. But I think the Amazon actually is better about playlists and such, and Google is better about actually answering questions correctly. And I do love my smart displays, the Home Hub proper, nice little display beside the bed, the actually speaker ability. I'm not an audiophile by any means, but that thing sounds pretty terrible, honestly.
Yeah.
Lenovo Smart Display sounds much better, but they both, far as their far field technology, I mean, you can be, pretty far away and it works pretty well. I haven't, because I'm kind of redoing things right now. Haven't set up many groups and so forth. Haven't done the drop in on the Echo products and so forth. But as I build out, we surely will do that, because many of the rooms I actually have an Amazon and a Google product in the same room. And in many rooms, that is true. Even my kids, they're fairly young, is that I put a Google, I think it was, I received a thing from Google. Hey, you have Google Drive. We want to send you a free Google Mini. Would you like that? I'm like, well, sure. And they sent it, and I put it in my son's room. And then my daughter comes in, pouty face. Well, where's my Google Home Mini? Fortunately, I had a spare, or actually two spares in the closet, because, doesn't everyone? And now it's so funny, we go to bed at night. On one side of the hall, you hear rainforest noises. On the other one, you just hear forest noises and so forth.
Yeah.
And so the children, it's like, it's just, second nature to them, very quickly. And even my wife likes it, of course, too.
Yeah, definitely a similar experience. I find myself thinking about it a lot when I see them my kids interacting with our Echo, and just how they're growing up in a world where that is absolutely not even something you think twice about. Of course, you have a speaker that you can talk to and ask questions and play music and, whatever else you can think of. So it is really interesting thinking about getting sort of meta here and philosophical, like what that relationship with technology is going to look like in 5, 10, 15 years from now. So definitely interesting. And I got a good laugh when you said, I got a couple extra sitting in the closet. Like, that's literally, these devices have become so cheap now that it's like, why not? The smart displays are really interesting to me. And that's one category that I have not pulled the trigger on yet in my own home, but I'm getting pretty close, I think. What's your experience been like? I mean, what are some of the use cases that you find in having the smart display versus just having a smart speaker?
When Amazon came out with the original generation Echo Show, the one that looked like the old Mitsubishi TVs.
Yeah, that's right.
And my wife became fairly frustrated with it, because the kids would, put like a YouTube video on, and everything they did, they would sit at the breakfast counter watching this thing. She goes, you can't eat a meal without watching this little, 8-inch cube, or ever how big the thing was. And kind of funny was, we realized really quickly that as it's playing the music, there are songs that have words in it that you don't really realize are in it until you see it scrolling across the screen. And so not always a kid-friendly device. But given that the wife acceptance factor was a little low on those, so I did actually send those back. And then recently around Christmas time, of course, they had a big sale on the Google Home Hub. So, I bought one of those, and then the Lenovo Smart Display, I think I got it for probably 50% off. And so the smart display is in the kitchen, the Home Hub beside the bed, the one without the camera, of course.
Yep.
And one of the things I thought was interesting, if you've seen the demo video for the Google product where they do the recipe, and you don't have to touch it, and it scrolls down and you go step by step by step. Well, that was a carefully orchestrated video because you'll do line number one. Then you do say line number one and have to say, okay, Google, next line. Okay, Google, next line. Okay, Google, next line. That gets very tiresome very quickly. So I think I did that all of probably half a recipe and never again. So I'll just get the screen dirty. But yeah, I do like the displays, the occasional YouTube video. Just as much, it shows the weather. It displays your calendar, music videos, music lyrics. So I'm actually pretty a big fan of that. And the Lenovo sounds so much better than the Home Hub does.
Good to know. Good to know. Very cool. Well, we are running just a little bit tight on time here, but I did want to ask, I think you've got some lighting control going on in the home, and we didn't really touch on that. So talk us through very quickly, like what do you have going on in terms of smart lighting in your house?
So the only thing I have right now are a few Lightify bulbs. I think it's a Sylvania bulb. So I don't do a lot of that yet because with Iris One Skin, you're kind of limited within that silo, but now I can kind of break free of those bonds, get some more routines. And referencing back to a comment earlier, I'm really having to think a lot more about home automation versus home control. Habitat only does local processing, but the one kind of obstacle I always did like the ability, turn the thermostat up. We leave home in about an hour away. Tap the thermostat back down. So there probably will be some items I'll move back to smart things so I can control them remotely. And that would be the thermostat. I guess if the external garage door Schlage lock doesn't work correctly, I can open the garage door remotely. And so it's garage doors, the thermostat, and there was one other thing. So probably it's going to be as much a mishmash as much as a Frankenstein. Simply Safe, Google, Echo and smart things all together instead of one product. Now I have all the products. Yeah. So it's one of those cases where you don't realize what you had until you no longer have it.
Right. Yeah, and it's a double-edged sword too. I talked a few minutes ago about it's great that you can go mishmash these things together and you don't have to make a huge upfront investment, but eventually, before you know it, you're in a situation where you've got 5 different apps and 3 different hubs, and nobody else in the home knows where to go other than maybe the mastermind behind it all. So it's definitely, a double-edged sword or a slippery slope, and that's certainly where making that next leap into something like a Control4, for example, has a lot of upside, but certainly comes in with a whole different, set of considerations, not least of which, of course, is the price. So yeah, really interesting. Quick follow-up question on that. So Habitat, I know, has a large focus on local processing, but it sounds like, so it sounds like what you're saying is there's no way to do it remotely, I guess, perhaps even through sort of hacking it together, but certainly not off the shelf. It sounds like you can't do any remote control at all.
Yeah, there's a question I asked Patrick from Habitat is, even Eero we thought was a very successful product, sold out, Ring, all to Amazon. And I asked him directly, I said, how are you going to sell this little $90 to $100 box one time, continue to develop and remain profitable? And partly what he said is, doing all this, remote, I guess, ability to control your home remotely, that's servers, that's data, that's cost. And we're not going to do that, one, as a means of security, and two, keeping our costs down. I'm still a little bit, kind of hesitant about that product. So now anything I buy will not be locked into any one product because, say, Habitat doesn't make it. I want to make sure it can work on another platform. And I probably will switch some things over, to smart things to have that remote control ability. And I believe they said, of course, you could, if you are somewhere, you can VPN to your home, open up a browser instance and control it there, which obviously is a little bit cumbersome.
Yeah.
But I know, like I say, is they want to remain that security, that very quick, action of, commands and local processing being so much faster. But boy, giving up that remote control ability is kind of a big deal to me too.
Yeah, and I can understand that. All right. Well, yeah, I mean, I'd say reacting to your last point there, if anything, that seems like the through line of all of your sort of trials and tribulations through the smart home is keeping it sort of agile and not locking yourself in too much to one thing, and kind of sort of learned a lesson, I guess, with Iris, even though, again, they did handle it pretty well. It certainly caused you no shortage of reworking and sort of refiguring things out from scratch. So very cool. Well, I really appreciate learning more about what you've got going on. What would you say is kind of the next big thing that you're looking to tackle in your home? Where do you go from here?
Well, one thing I've learned in the first few days, Habitat, it was a little slow to respond, but someone's like Gavin Campbell, he's been on your show before, and I think you ought to have him again. And I've told him that.
Yeah.
and it has kind of settled itself in, because one thing I didn't mention, they do have a rule machine. They have dashboards. They have rule machines where it's kind of like they're built in, if then that, if this then that, or whatever. It can do things like that. That you do need a solid network. I had Eero, and then I went with fiber, and they updated their built-in, or I guess the required router, which is just AT&T fiber, which is just a real, in the vernacular, a real POS.
Yeah.
And so my next is actually to upgrade my network to some ubiquity equipment. So I got to run some cable, and I want to get some of that done before the South Carolina sun, kind of hits in, get that network real stable, and then kind of get more into their automations, use my sensors more, do this, do that when that occurs, and so forth, and kind of branch it out. Because once again, remember, my wife is over there simply safe. She'll never be the wiser. And so that part is kind of a win-win for me, because I can never do that with Iris.
Yeah.
She was never going to have that.
Yeah, well, no, it's a good litmus test. We've got a Ring security system here at home, and granted, I haven't really spent the time to kind of force the issue, but my wife, who's she's not averse to technology, but it's just not really on her radar as much, and she doesn't really interact with it. So that your wife has fully adopted Simply Safe, I think you're wise to sort of leave that cordoned off and let that system function on its own, and keep experimenting. It sounds like you've been able to do a lot of great things and find a lot of great deals in the process. So again, I've really enjoyed learning more about this. I don't know if you're active on. I should say I know you're active on Twitter. I don't know if that's the best place. If anyone listening wanted to follow up and maybe ask you a question or get a hold of you, would Twitter be the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, like I say, yeah, absolutely. It's AWRAYNOR. That's the place I'm by far the most active. I do a little bit. If you have specific Habitat questions, the Habitat forums are great. Don't forget the livingwithiris.com forums. There's a lot of, I guess, threads and sub-threads or whatever they call them. A lot of people, they're really helpful. And that's the best thing, is that they are helpful. They're not like some other parts of the internet where they can be quite rude.
Yeah.
But yeah, AW Raynor on Twitter, very active, as you see.
Cool. Yeah, and you've been definitely making the rounds, on appearing on several podcasts lately to talk about this transition of yours. And so we appreciate it, and I'm glad we finally were able to get you on the show. And again, we really appreciate your support. So thanks so much, Anthony, for coming on. We appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much. I told my wife, Iris going away is the best thing that's ever happened to me.
There you go. All right. Well, thanks again.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, that will do it for our conversation with Anthony. And again, I really enjoyed sitting down with him. And I think the biggest thing that struck me was just the sort of pros and cons of being able to go in and kind of piece together, frankly, a smart home system these days for pretty cheap and with just a little bit of elbow grease. But of course, the trade-offs to that and having these companies sort of come and go and having to kind of hodgepodge things together. But Anthony appears to have done a great job of navigating that landscape, and also the spouse acceptance factor, which he alluded to numerous times, which can be a very real challenge, all jokes aside, less of a gender thing and really just about making sure everybody in the home is on the same page about how to use all of this technology and how to avoid frustration in so doing. So again, enjoyed that conversation. If you have any feedback, questions, comments, ideas for show topics, anything you want to send our way, we would love to hear from you. We read all of those messages. Best way to reach us is feedback@HomeTech.fm. Or if you would prefer, you can head on over to our website, HomeTech.fm/feedback, and fill out an online form. So we do thank you for tuning in. As we always do, we want to send a extra big thank you to all of you who support our show financially through our Patreon page. If you're not familiar with how you can do that, we are a 100% listener-supported show here. You can head on over to HomeTech.fm/support. Again, that's HomeTech.fm/support. And there you can learn about how you can support the show for as little as $1 a month. We got a whole bunch of people who have come on board and done that, and we really do appreciate it. So one last time, that is HomeTech.fm/support. If you enjoy what we do here and want to contribute to our efforts, we would really, really appreciate that. So thank you so much for tuning in for my solo adventure show here this week. We look forward to having Seth back. We thank Anthony for coming on and joining us, and we will look forward to putting out another episode next week. Hope you have a great one, and we'll talk to you next time.